Hey everyone, how's it going? My name is Patrick Liu, and I'm going to be your host for the Diabetes Survival Guide show. I'm the founder of the Diabetes Management Group, where I am a fitness and wellness coach for people with type 2 diabetes and prediabetes. And this show will be a way to share the phenomenal stories about people with all forms of diabetes, healthcare professionals who work with people with diabetes, health and wellness coaches who work with people in this population, and or caregivers and relatives with people with diabetes across the world. A little bit of a personal background for me as a show starter is I was diagnosed with prediabetes back in 2021 and made some modifications to my lifestyle and habits to successfully reverse it in 2022. However, that onset of me receiving prediabetes in 2021 triggered my memories of when my grandpa, who passed away when I was a sophomore in high school from kidney failure secondary to his type 2 diabetes, about the care that was misunderstood and not the greatest at that time. So I want to provide this show as a way to explore the different spectrums of diabetes and healthcare professionals sharing their tips of what they've seen helpful in working with folks with them, and then some things that weren't as helpful so that y'all can learn something. So thank you so much, and we'll get started with the disclaimers and the show.
Disclaimers. This show is not medical advice or a treatment plan and may contain sensitive and explicit content. It is intended for general education and demonstration purposes only. This content should not be used to self diagnose or self treat any health, medical, or physical conditions. Don't use this show to avoid going to your own healthcare professional or to replace the advice they give you. Consult with your healthcare provider before attempting anything you learned in this show. You agreed to identify and hold harmless the creators of this material for any and all losses, injury, or damages resulting from any and all claims that arise from your use or misuse of this show material. The creators and guests of this show make no representations about the accuracy or suitability of this content. Use these materials at your sole risk. Views and opinions are individual to the creators and guests of this show and do not represent any other opinions or entities and are not intended to offend anybody. We hope you enjoy the show. Hey, how's it going, everyone? Welcome back to another episode of the Diabetes Survival Guide Show. I'm your host, Patrick. I'm a 180 system provider, a student physical therapist, and I'm almost finished up with my precision nutrition coaching certification. And I'm the founder of the Diabetes Management Group. Today, we are joined by a very special and a very amazing guest, Dallas Carter. So, if y'all don't know Dallas, he has the smile that lights up everybody's day. He just comes through and look, it's lighting up my day right now. Awesome smile, beautiful smile. And Dallas actually served on my team when I was the student body vice president of service when I was attending Weber State University for our undergraduate degrees. And Dallas played a phenomenal role in being an amazing team leader and serving the community with the Special Olympics, being a team leader for his cohort and his group, and really playing an instrumental role in attending and participating in international service trips and projects. And for those of y'all who are like, why are you bringing Dallas on the show? Dallas has type 1 diabetes, and I want him to share his story and the lessons that he's learned throughout it and the growth and development that he's had in hopes that y'all can learn something from him and maybe hit up Dallas for any inquiries. As we get into this, Dallas, if you wouldn't mind introducing yourself and sharing a bit of your diagnosis story for the things that I have yet to cover or haven't covered, please feel free to do
Yeah,
so.
for sure. Well, first of all, thank you for that intro. I feel honored. I'm happy to be part of the podcast here. Yeah, I'm Dallas. I'm currently a registered nurse. I'm a focal nurse. I work all parts of the hospital. I'm here in Ogden, Utah. I work at McKay Dee Hospital. And yeah, like Patrick said, we met each other doing student body stuff at Weber State. So my diagnosis story is I was actually diagnosed with type 1 diabetes when I was 2 years old. So been something I've dealt with my entire life. I don't really remember life without diabetes. So I was actually diagnosed in October, so it was right before Halloween.
Ooh.
And I do remember, yeah, a lot of our neighborhood volunteered to give me toys that year instead of candy for Halloween, and that helped my family a lot to be able to control it. So right off the bat, I had a lot of great support from family and community. But yeah, my sister was actually diagnosed as well about a
What?
year after I was. Yeah. So my younger sister, type 1 diabetic as well, and that was actually a huge help for me growing up. So yeah, that's a little bit. That's a quick intro to my story and how I was diagnosed.
Yeah, thanks so much for sharing it. And that's crazy. Does anyone else in your family have type 1 diabetes or
No, so there's actually no history that we know of. The generation before me, there's none, not my grandparents, anything like that. So my sister and I, we just lucked out, you know. My parents asked when we were diagnosed, what are the odds of having two children with type 1? And they said, I don't know, something, because we have no history. They said something between you guys, just, I guess, just made us more likely. So, and I've been grateful to, obviously, I wouldn't necessarily wish it upon anybody, but
Mhm.
I've been grateful to have my sister that sharing it with me.
Yeah. Thanks so much for sharing. And I guess what has been some things that you've learned as you were growing up with type 1 diabetes with your sister and having that familial support?
Just having someone to talk to about, I think, is a big thing. Just, I think it's important to have people on board who are close to you. They can help you deal with it. Even today, and now that I'm living on my own, I'm 27. My mom still follows me on my Dexcom app, and she makes sure that I'm taken care of. Definitely good to have a support system. Sometimes it's, I think, tempting to not talk about it or to hide diabetes. You don't necessarily want everyone to know. But if people know your goals, what you're trying to do, also if they know what to look out for, if you get into a situation where um, you're in trouble, then it's good to know that the people who care about you know what to do. So
Hmm. Very important factor, especially for those who work around you or those who serve with you, and making sure that we have an amazing time. Because I
right,
remember when we had the opportunity to play the recreational like soccer games, and you were in volleyball as well, right? I can't remember. At the
I
games, I
did
think you were.
soccer. I don't think I did. I ever did the volleyball, but
Got just
I
the
did
one
do
with Special
soccer.
Olympics, right? Or
Yeah, so we did do the recreational indoor soccer, and then yeah, I did do Special Olympics outdoor soccer as well as basketball, coaching those. But
yeah, great guy, awesome skills. His footwork, insane. And Dallas, I also wanted to touch on the point of what inspired you to become a nurse.
yeah, so nursing was never necessary. It wasn't really in my plans when I began thinking about a career. In high school, I became interested in pursuing endocrinology,
Hmm.
wanted to go to medical school, be a doctor, and help people like myself with diabetes. And so
Hmm.
that was the motivation. And I considered medical school at first. And after beginning pre med, was thinking maybe medical school is not the route I want to go. My backup was to be a PA. And as I began to get hours for that, because becoming a PA requires a lot of experience in the medical field to begin with.
Hmm.
And so I went and got my CNA license. And during that, I learned about nurse practitioner and what that was. I really just didn't have much of an idea before that
Yeah.
about being a nurse practitioner. But when I heard about it, sounded like exactly what I wanted to do. So basically, here in Utah, a nurse practitioner can prescribe medications and practice without a doctor's supervision, whereas a PA, you work under a doctor's license. And I said, that sounds really good to me. I'd love to one day be able to have my own practice. And the idea of being able to work as a nurse while I'm going to school really appealed to me as well. And so I've been doing nursing for almost 2 years now and really enjoying it. I've really liked just working at the bedside, being close with the patients and having that interaction. Yeah, I'm glad I did it. It's been a really good experience for me. So
Oh, I'm getting a lot of chills as you're saying it too, especially how much you enjoy the patient interaction and improving your bedside manners. Looking forward for the opportunities that comes about becoming a nurse practitioner and the frameworks behind it. It's really, really awesome that you're doing it for the service of others and then making sure that you can have your own ability to serve others the way that you believe that they deserve to be treated and served.
Thank you, Patrick. Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm looking forward to it. All right. Appreciate it.
All right. So, other questions that I have, I know some of our audience members may be considering, ooh, international service trips. Like Dallas has been a part of that. Would you mind sharing some learning lessons that you've had when participating in your international service trips in regards to your health and the experience itself?
Sure.
And listing
Yeah,
out where you went to too. I'm pretty sure they're like eager to know where did he go?
yeah. Yeah, so I've done a couple international service trips. They I went through an organization called YouthLink here in Utah. Quick shout out to YouthLink. Their mission is to create lifetime humanitarians, and they do an awesome job. They take a bunch of students, high school, college age, as well as advisors any age that would like to go, and they spend first of all they spend an entire year preparing, so doing service through local organizations. So I did Primary Children's Hospital, volunteered there, as well as hospice here in Ogden. So that was a great experience. And then my first trip I went to Guatemala.
Mm,
I ended up doing two of them, and so I went to Peru the next time. And yeah, really awesome experience. We spent 2 weeks out there in Guatemala. We were working on homes. We were putting in concrete floors. A lot of the homes in the place that we visited, San Martin Tepeque is the name of the place that we were at. Lots of dirt floors, and yeah, putting in concrete floors some so they weren't worrying about the dust in the homes. And then in Peru, we rebuilt a school that had been damaged. And then, so there's one main service product that everyone does, and then you also split into groups and do. We have a health group that just teaches basic health principles, business group that helps give loans to individuals who are looking to start businesses or who already have businesses but just need a little help. And yeah, really cool experience. As far as taking care of health while traveling, I think the biggest takeaway for me, the thing I've learned is just it's important to be prepared in situations like that where you don't necessarily have access to all the things you do at home. Make sure that you have everything with you that you are going to need, first of all, and then just planning for the day. For me, lows are always an issue, especially for type 1s. Frequent lows can be a thing. So just packing the snacks that I need and then just paying attention to what I'm eating. It's hard to maintain the routine is a big thing, things like that. So just paying really close attention to what I'm doing, making sure I have the carbs I need if I'm going to be out in the sun or working, as well as just keeping track of what I'm eating, making sure I'm familiar with what's in it so that um, I can treat it, correctly. So
yeah, that's awesome. I would say the golden nuggets that I'm sure our audience is listening to and hearing, or as they felt the experience that you've shared, it's the matter of the amazing experiences that one can have by serving others and seeing their smiles and being able to learn that rich culture and that opportunity there, while also ensuring that how can I take care of myself whenever I'm out in those situations and making sure that they are prepared for it and how to assess what's going to be happening over there. Because I know for some folks that I'm following and they've done some trips out to places that are a bit hot. I think
mhm.
one person in particular that I remember, Ben Zeal, he's a type 1 diabetic, a registered dietitian, has his certified strength and conditioning specialist, and he's also a
Yeah,
certified diabetes care and education specialist. So this guy's just
awesome.
very knowledgeable in the experiences. I think he's had type 1 diabetes since he was like in his teens or early youth. And yeah, and he just shares his experiences when he took his honeymoon trip to Spain, and then the heat in those areas, it was just something that one would have to factor and consider, making sure that one is hydrated, because if one's
Mhm.
not hydrated, that significantly impacts their blood sugar scores and how they feel, and even their day-to-day routine while trying to explore the city, trying out new foods, and enjoying a sporting event. Because I think he was out in the one of the football leagues over there and having a good
Right.
time.
Awesome. Yeah, way cool. Yeah, on the topic of as long as we're talking about health and travel, I maybe not as much diabetes related, but I did get really sick in Guatemala.
Oh,
All the way home, actually, from sick to my stomach on the ride home and the flight home. Really bad experience. But I've learned also that just pay attention to your body. I've learned that when I am going without sleep, I had stayed up almost that whole night just for fun. And I've noticed combined with travel, when I'm not getting enough sleep, I tend to get really sick. And so I don't know what that was about, whether I caught something there. It went after a day, it was pretty quick, or if I just tend to get sick in those situations. So I've learned that. So another thing, just be aware of your body, know what what to look out for, and yeah, stay hydrated, all that good
yeah.
stuff. So
Could be a
yeah.
combination of a bunch of those things too, because it's, oh, lack of sleep,
Hmm.
and then not being hydrated enough, and then that's just a huge combo of just increasing risk of susceptibility for catching something.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Yep. Take care of yourself.
Hey everyone, thank you so much for tuning in to this podcast. And before we continue with the rest of this show, I wanted to let y'all know, please feel free to give this podcast a 5-star rating if you like it, share it with other folks that you think it'd be beneficial for. And if you haven't already, feel free to subscribe and follow to the Diabetes Management Group for awesome tips to manage your type 2 diabetes or prediabetes. And let's get back to the show. All right. The next question I want to ask you, Dallas, is what has been the hardest moment that you've had during your personal journey with type 1 diabetes, and what did you learn from it?
Yeah. So trying to think about anyone. I have been lucky enough to stay out of the emergency room for most of my life, because it's been most of my life that I've had diabetes. And so I've been grateful for that. I've had obviously close calls where I've been some scary lows,
Mm-hmm.
and then as well as times in my life where I haven't kept as good glycemic control as I would like. Probably one of the more difficult times, I was living in Texas. So I served a mission for my church in Texas. So it was my first experience being away from home. So diabetes was all on my own. In high school, I was taking care of it mostly. But as a child, it had been my parents. Really, it was their disease for a long time. My mom was the one checking our blood sugars and correcting it for us. So as I grew up, I began to take more and more of that role. But high school. Sometimes you're responsible and sometimes not as much. But anyway, first time away from home, first time kind of living on my own. I'm taking full ownership of taking care of my diabetes, just taking care of myself in general. And so the time when I was out there, I had some of the highest A1Cs of my life. A lot of that was because I was being fed by other people. I didn't really choose what I ate necessarily all the time. And I was too afraid to tell people, hey, I want to eat this. Maybe not. That'll help me to control it. I do have an insulin pump, so I can eat whatever as long as I do have coverage. But it becomes more and more difficult the more sugar loaded food that I eat, things like that. So I was eating a lot of carbs, lots of tortillas, soda, and beans. Anyway, I had some of the highest A1Cs of my life, and talked with a doctor down there, and he let me have it. What are you eating? He said, are you telling me you eat whatever you want? Just laid into me, which was a wake up call.
Mm-hmm.
It was good because after that visit, checking it, my A1C was high enough that they considered sending me home for a moment.
Mm.
They said, as long as we get this back under control, though, you'll be okay. And so I said, okay, I got to make some changes. Um, Something I had never thought too much. Most of my life, I was pretty well controlled. And I also, most of the time, ate what I wanted and was able to still maintain it. But I was realizing it was becoming more and more difficult. So, once again, coming back to talking to the people around you about your goals, as well as just having people in your circle. I got After that, I was put, I believe, purposefully with another missionary who was very health conscious. I began eating a lot better. We exercised every day. And more importantly, probably the biggest thing that he did for me was he would call ahead when we were going to eat places and say, hey, just so you know, like, Dallas is type 1 diabetic, where he's trying to get his A1C back under control. So if you're able to feed him foods that aren't like super high in carbs, that'll help him to kind of adjust for them more easily. And yeah, and of course, everybody down there is, oh yeah, type 2 diabetes is very common in South Texas. Yeah, I'm diabetic too. We're gonna eat fish and salad, and we'll have water. It's gonna be a good meal. I'm like, oh, perfect. That'll make
Oh,
it much easier. And so
yeah.
that was awesome to have people looking out for me. And it was something I never would have thought to do. Just I did not something I wanted to bring up. I said I can just give myself insulin for whatever I'm given, which a lot of times is the case. But just him making that extra effort to say, hey, we're gonna do these things, and I've got your back on all of this. It made huge steps for me to be able to make my goals much quicker than I would have had I tried to handle it myself. So, yeah, I think that was a learning experience for me.
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing that. And I'm sure other folks are probably empathizing too of, oh, being put in some situations where some cultures, especially in the Hispanic culture, Asian culture, and cultures in Greece, like accepting food, you want to make sure you accept the food because that's their gratitude that they're
Right.
showing it. So it's tough because being a missionary, you want to make sure that you have that rapport built with them and also making sure that you are accepting their gratitude and intent while also making sure that it's not saying no and then taking it the wrong way, that it becomes a
Yes.
very mental game of, okay, we're playing chess with each other and I want to be as
Uh-huh.
polite as possible and as respectful as possible and serving and doing as much as I can without making a move where it just wipes out the entire board.
That's a great point that I forgot to make. Yes, it's very much part of the culture there, that you eat their food. And so the way I tried to compromise that is one, like I said, number one, that call ahead helped a ton because they knew they were on the same page as me. And
Mhm.
then two, I always made sure that I ate what was given to me, right? I always ate what was on my plate and always made sure I was grateful for it, told them how good it was. And then, because at the beginning of my mission, I was very concerned about that. I was like, you have to eat everything they put in front of you. And so it was just like plates on plates. I would eat until I just literally could not anymore.
Oh, geez.
And so I began to be more careful about, oh, thank you so much. I'm full, but then I can have a tiny bit more. And then you call it. Just say it, just let them know earlier that, okay, I really do appreciate the food. It's great. I will take some home, actually, if I can. I've got to stop soon. So yeah, it was finding that balance as well was a part of it as well. So,
Yeah, if y'all don't understand how kind Dallas is, he's one of the kindest people and most genuine guys you'll ever meet. So him needing to stand up for himself and doing that, it's a really tall task for him to do just because he really cares a lot about how he's able to serve others and making sure that the positive intent it's there and it's maintained and making sure people feel great. So I'm grateful that you had a good companion with you. And for those who are about to start their mission or are currently missionaries and maybe catching wind of this through some side conversations and chatter. Hopefully that has been helpful for y'all's in learning this. All right, Dallas, if you were to share one piece of advice with someone who is just recently diagnosed, what would it be?
sure. So I think the big thing, first of all, I would just say that you got this. It's like you can do this. It's obviously tough. It's a huge transition. I almost in some ways feel grateful that I was so young when I was diagnosed. And just because the getting used to that was something I almost never had to deal with, if that makes sense. I've
Hmm.
At this point I've lived with diabetes my entire life. There was no like break-in period for me almost.
Hmm.
And I feel for anybody who's diagnosed later in life, whether it be type 1 or type 2, because learning that, learning how to take care of it and dealing with that big change is for sure a difficult thing. So first of all, just you can do it. It's something that you can control, and it takes work just like anything else. It takes dedication. If I could go back to when I was diagnosed and talk to my mom and tell her, I imagine that would be a cool thing if I
Yeah.
was able to do that. Give her a big hug, let her know you can do this. Like, it's going to be tough, but I turn out okay. All right. So it is going to be okay. And she had somebody, luckily, who I don't remember. She's told me the story before. I want to say it was the doctor after he came in with the diagnosis. I'm glad he was there. He gave my mom a big hug, said, Mom, it's going to be tough, but and I know you don't want to hear this right now, but if you have to choose a chronic condition for your son to have, it's a pretty good one. It's a good one because you can control it. It takes a lot of work, but you can lead a normal life. You can live a healthy life. And it depends on just making sure you're doing the things you know you need to, right? Just staying on top of your control of your blood sugars, make sure you're exercising, eating healthy, taking your pills or taking your insulin, whatever it may be, depending on your own treatment plan. But yeah, just say you can do this, and yeah, I think that's that's uh, the major theme I would want to drive home.
Yep, people can do this, rely on those support symptoms, and definitely be
Mhm.
sure to give those hugs and uh, those words of gratitude or acts of gratitude, or however one would best receive the feelings of thank you so much for being a part of my life and for helping me along my journey and serving me along my journey. Because,
Yeah,
yeah, Dallas turned out great. I don't know about you.
I did okay. I'm okay.
Too humble. All right. I did want to ask a couple more questions before we're finished up. So, one of my questions is, and I'm sure other folks may be wondering as well, when COVID happened, I assume you were still having some shifts at the hospital. What was that like, and how did you manage those situations?
So COVID hit during nursing school, so that was a big changes in my education, first of all. But by the time I got my RN when I started working in the hospital, we were still, yeah, like you said, we're still dealing with COVID. It changed, it definitely changed my nursing experience coming in during a pandemic. Very interesting, but and it was a time that burnout among healthcare workers was becoming a big thing. So a lot of people leaving their jobs as nurses, a lot of people just feeling overwhelmed and overworked. So that was a crazy time to come into nursing. But as far as I think it did help me to become a better nurse just because you're seeing all of this. It's trying to remember that these are people because because I was able to see that I don't know almost dichotomy of like where you want to treat these people, but also you're getting to a point where everybody's so burnt out, and it becomes and also with the isolation, it's you almost distance yourself from your patients in that way because it becomes more difficult to go into the rooms. It's like such a big process to get in there. You're trying to limit those interactions because you're trying to keep on top of infection prevention, but trying to remember that there's a person in that room and they need you. So it's making every one of those interactions count for something, just and trying to be as personable and have as much empathy as you can during that process. I think was a lot that I learned from that, and just the importance of human connections. Because I also worked in a nursing facility for a while during COVID and seeing the impact that isolation had on some of the guys that were living there. It was so detrimental to their health, just not being able to have the same interaction with families they would. Sometimes, as caregivers, as medical professionals, you're that link or you're that connection that they need. So, just remembering that to be a human, which sounds like it should be easy to remember, but such an important part of, I think, the work we do and general health and being in general.
Yeah, that's awesome. Happy to hear that. I got so many chills when you were like, "Hey, remember that the other person in the room needs somebody to take care of them."
Mhm.
And no matter what situation is going on, to take it one day at a time, and
Absolutely.
one can overcome the things that are all going on, and we can get through this together. And eventually, by taking care of ourselves and making sure that we are there to serve others, that positive things will come from it, and we can get over
100%. Yeah.
it.
Think you take care of yourself before you can take care of other people. And that's a huge part of it as well. Yeah.
Hmm. Yeah. All right. The last question that I want to ask is, Dallas, what is your zombie apocalypse survival plan?
Oh yeah, that's a good question. I don't know. I don't know if you've seen I've seen memes before putting treadmills that are facing the wrong direction outside of your house. You just put them all around the entire house, and so that when the zombies come up, they just walk on the treadmill instead of getting into your house. Um, or or if you face them the opposite way, they just step on it and they fall backwards. Um, so that's one thing that's always been in the back of my mind. I think I have a lot of insulin, but if I could store up enough, I imagine that might do some damage to the zombies. Drop their blood sugar. That could be good as well. I think in general, I look for prevention. So let's keep the zombie apocalypse from happening as much as we can. So that might be my first plan.
Hmm. Smart goals. The treadmill idea, prevention, and then if need be, if you have such a huge amount of
Use,
insulin, just knock them out.
you can use what weapons you have. You got to be creative sometimes. So
Yeah. All right. Dallas, it has been an absolute pleasure in catching up with you and for having you as a guest here on this podcast. I'm sure our audience members are like, oh my gosh, Dallas is amazing. He traveled to Guatemala and Peru and helped build out some buildings, repaired some schools, is a nurse doing a fantastic job, and also sharing the awesome learning lessons when he was a missionary. We've got to connect with him. So, how can people find you? How can they connect with you?
sure, yeah. So you can find me on Instagram. It's Dallas Carter 080. So I'm on Instagram. You can also find me on Facebook, just Dallas Carter. I'm in I'm around Ogden, Utah areas. And yeah, email dallascarter08@gmail.com or drcarter02 at comcast.net as well. So yeah, that's me. I'm out there.
Awesome. All right. Thank you all again so much for tuning in and for listening to the amazing story of the one and only Dallas Carter. I had
Thank you,
the
Patrick.
awesome opportunity to give him a recommendation letter for the stuff that he applied into and for his job. So I'm very grateful that Dallas reached out to me for those and that I'm able to serve him back in the ways that he served me. So definitely reach out to
Thank you,
the
Patrick.
Dallas.
I appreciate being part of it, and it's good to see you again.
Yeah,
As
always
always,
good to see you.
next, glad I can be a part of it.
Of course. All right, everyone. Thanks again for tuning in. And of course, do one small thing that you can do to improve your health and let that compound and be an amazing thing. And we'll see y'all next week for the next episode.